So tell me a little bit about Keystone beliefs about the volunteers or the playroom buddies.
Well, I think initially when we went to America, we had a fear about attracting enough volunteers, but then our mindset changed with that because we thought with everything it's about beliefs. So we thought, let's believe that we're going to get lots and lots of volunteers and that we're always going to be in a position that we're going to be selecting which ones are going to be fitting into our family rather than just taking anyone that works in the door. So we decided very early, well, after I think the first year, that we were going to, we were going to have a particular type of volunteer that was going to fit into our family. And we thought if they're not going to do the 4 hours, if they're not going to be open to exploring their attitude and things like that, that they weren't going to be part of this program. So we thought it's about belief, and our belief is that we could find these fantastic people with all the qualities that we needed in the program to help the program go forward. And once we held on to that belief and thought we're not going to compromise on our wanting this, that's when it actually started to happen, when we got the people that we ideally wanted. It is a lot of law of attraction, like Ari's saying.
And what about the difference in perspective between someone who might be sort of concerned that it's just kind of difficult having people in and out of the house with how you viewed the team?
I think I didn't see the team because they were all hand selected, I think. They all fit into our family. Like every single person that fit, I'd say this about every single person that was in our team felt like a family member. When we opened the doors to them, it wasn't going to be you've clocked into a job. So those people were not employees. They were actually going to be friends of our family, a part of our family, helping our son. So when we viewed them that way, it became who would be appropriate, who we would love to have in our family. And they just, because you didn't treat them like an employee situation and you were open, they actually dropped the barriers and they became open too. And they saw themselves as an extension of our family. All our volunteers, had family dinners together, and we did that regularly. Every team meeting we had a family dinner together. So it didn't feel like they were these strangers coming in and out. We got to know all our volunteers. They were a part of our family, and that was the difference. It's not about numbers and just getting in and clocking in and out. It's about people caring and being part of a community.
Well, can I add to that? Really important. So coming from, that's where we ended up. Where we started off with volunteers, when we came back from the US, we were concerned, particularly Irene, was what we're going to invite strangers into our house. It could be pedophiles, it could be X, Y, Z people. How do we know? Right? And then as we went through, we realised that's a set of beliefs that we've been given through the media, etc., etc. And as we went through, what changed was we saw a lot of the wonderful things that people out there had to offer. Like we had volunteers, we didn't pay our volunteers to come in. They were coming in, giving 4 hours a week, right, of their own time to learn. But we're telling them what you're getting out of this program, etc. But there's a lot of wonderful stuff going out there. This is something we learned. The other thing that shifted is that we didn't compromise on our beliefs on volunteers. We spent the first 18 months, I'd say, maybe 2 years, the program just accepting, afraid of losing volunteers, and we got to a point where we said, you know what, we're not compromising. If you can't do the 4 hours, if you haven't got the right attitude, we'll come, we'll interview you. And we were true to our thinking. If we thought, no, this person doesn't look committed, we'd let them go. So we got to a point where, just in terms of the numbers, like I was saying, I spent half an hour a day every day at work making calls for volunteers, etc. So I have a book where over the last 5 years or so we have had responses, or I've contacted over 400 potential volunteers. I think 22 to 25 of those actually came into the program, right? So out of that whole number, and that was our choosing. right? Because we wanted people that were going to gel in the program, but they didn't start off that way, right? We started off in, you know, a lot of ums and ahs, question marks about volunteers, but it evolved to what Irini's saying, is that, you know, we have volunteers who have not been in our program for 3 odd years, and they're still an extension of our family. How wonderful.
And the Christmas party. All those volunteers every year, every single volunteer that participated in our program over the last 6 years gets together every Christmas and has a Christmas party at our house. So, and they keep coming back because they do feel like they shared a precious time of their life was spent with this boy.
Yep. And we played Christmas cricket.
And we play Christmas cricket. Which is the highlight of Evan's day on that day.
And what about, what belief did you have that helped you to sustain and keep moving forward in the program, you know, after the first 6 months, after the first year? Because you guys have run a program for, okay, it's very part-time now, it's, you know, a day a week, but for 6 years. So what was your perspective on continuing to run a program?
Well, to this day, to this day, it's the fact that it's, I think the core belief for me is that this is not a sacrifice for us. It's actually an exciting prospect. It's similar to, I guess, someone who's, you know, a keen sports person, you know, or a swimmer who gets up at 4 a.m. An Olympic swimmer will get up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever they do, and they do, you know, 12 hours of training a day or whatever it is for years on end. What drives them to do that? Right? If it's a sacrifice, you're not going to be motivated to do that. But there's something that motivates, something thrilling about it, that there's this pot of gold, that, you know, there's something nurturing about what I'm doing that spurs you on. And when you're in that mindset, right, it doesn't feel like a sacrifice. It feels like you want to do it. So why do we still do it? We're still doing it 1.5 days a week, right? Evan's in school. He chooses to be at home 1 day, so he's doing 4 days at school, mainstream school, and he wants to do 1 day at home. We're going with that, and we're happy to go with that because it feels like this is the best possible thing we could be doing. Right? There's nothing better.
Well, you know, like I have my thing as well, because I think, you know, the first year there was nothing. We were doing everything we could, the traditional therapies out there, and there was very little change in Evan. And I think after we started Sunrise and we started experiencing change, we thought, guess what? If we embrace this program, we had seen so much change in Evan, you know, in that first year in terms of just because he wasn't really talking. We had big advances in terms of eye contact, and that was huge because he hadn't looked at anyone. And we thought, you know something, if we really throw ourselves into this program, imagine what would happen if, you know, if we just do it and believe, but do it with all our hearts, you know, and he will change, because look how much change he's had in this year that we're just sort of, you know, dabbling in this Sunrise stuff. And the fact that he kept embracing it, like he felt the lack of judgment on him, he started saying, I'm going to change. Like we all started changing together. There's a belief in that there's not something wrong with just you, that we all are changing together and there's a momentum going together. And like, why doesn't Evan want to stop the Sunrise program? You ask him, because he loves it, because it's the most nurturing thing he's got. Now, Evan's excelling in school, Sean, you know, and every teacher says to him, you know, like, oh, come on, Evan, come 5 days a week. I mean, you're doing grade 5 work and you've got friends and da-da-da. Why are you doing this 1 day of homeschooling a day? Well, because that's what helped him get there. And he's using that as, he's like, Mum, I don't need to go that day. I can take a day off. Well, the day off he spends doing Sunrise, but that's something he's enjoying, and that's what, you know, that attitude, that acceptance, and that refueling is what's driving him to make such advances, you know, in the world. Yeah. Why would I stop? Why should we stop after 6 years? I'm going to keep going till he says, Mum, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, can I give one example? This is speaking of sort of core beliefs. So here's an example that we've used ongoing, particularly in the team meetings with the volunteers, where I sort of describe, especially with new volunteers, the example I use is the German backpacker example, which Irene's very familiar with. And so the idea is that you have a German backpacker who's never come to Australia, and he's in Melbourne and he wants to get to Sydney, right? He hasn't got enough money, but the point is he wants to get to Sydney. So whether he hitchhikes, catches a train, washes dishes in Benalla, and then catches a bus to Albury, etc. There could be 12 different routes that he takes. The point is his goal is, I want to get to Sydney. He doesn't have a roadmap, right? But if he's committed enough and he takes action, he's going to get to Sydney, right? So I think the way most of us do life is that we want the roadmap. And I say, how do I get to Sydney? Show me the roadmap, right? And that's not, if you need a roadmap, then don't do Sunrise, because that's not how it works. Be a German backpacker who's visiting Australia for the first time and says, I want to get to there and I will wash dishes to do that, right? And then Sunrise will work for you. That's the way I see it.
That's brilliant.